My son tried to control my money. Then he found out what I had quietly prepared. The first time my son told me what I should do with my money, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I thought he was joking. We were sitting in my living room, the same room where I had rocked him to sleep as a baby, helped him with homework, and stayed awake countless nights worrying about his future. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, catching dust motes in the air. He leaned back on the sofa, confident, relaxed, scrolling on his phone as if he were the one paying the bills. "You know, Dad," he said casually, "at your age, it might be better if I manage your finances." I looked at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. "I mean," he continued, finally glancing up, "it's just practical. You're retired. Things can get confusing. I don't want you making mistakes." That was the moment I realized something had changed, not in me, but in him. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded and said, "We'll see." What my son didn't know was that, for the past 2 years, I had been quietly preparing for this very moment. The life I built with my own hands. I wasn't always a retired man with time on his hands and silver in his hair. For 35 years, I worked as an electrical contractor. I started with nothing but a borrowed toolbox and a second-hand van that broke down every other week. There were years I worked 7 days straight, crawling through dusty ceilings and muddy trenches so my family could live comfortably. I missed birthdays. I came home exhausted. My hands were permanently calloused, my back stiff before I turned 40. But I never complained. Every rupee I earned went somewhere meaningful. School fees, groceries, medical bills, and eventually, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. I taught my son one lesson above all others: earn honestly and live within your means. When my wife passed away 8 years ago, the house grew quiet, too quiet. My son was already married by then, living separately with his wife and children. He visited often at first, then less, then mostly when he needed something. Still, I didn't mind. Parents are not accounts to be balanced. We are wells meant to give water, even when we are running low. Subtle changes, clear intentions. The suggestion started small. "You don't really need 2 bank accounts, Dad. Why keep cash at home? That's risky. Let me hold on to your ATM card just in case." Each sentence was wrapped in concern, but I could hear the impatience underneath. He wasn't asking, he was testing boundaries. One day, he brought printed documents. "Just sign these," he said. "Power of attorney makes things easier." I read every word carefully. It gave him control over my accounts, investments, and property decisions. Complete authority. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back on the table. "I'll think about it," I said. His smile faded for half a second. He recovered quickly, but I noticed. From that day on, his visits increased, so did his advice and his pressure. He began commenting on my expenses, questioning why I donated to the mosque, why I helped a neighbor with medical bills, why I repaired the house instead of saving the money. "That money will eventually be ours anyway," he said once, without realizing what he had revealed. Ours, not mine. What he never asked. My son never asked me one important question. He never asked, "What do you want, Dad?" He assumed my life was already over, that I was waiting quietly for the final chapter, with nothing left to decide. But while he was busy planning how to manage my money, I was planning something else entirely. 2 years earlier, after a friend of mine was forced out of his own home by relatives, I had learned a hard lesson. Love does not always protect you, but preparation can. So I started organizing my affairs. Quietly, carefully, the preparation he never saw. First, I met with a lawyer, not the family one my son recommended, but an independent man with no connections. I told him everything. "I don't want conflict," I said, "but I want dignity." We drafted a detailed will, clear, unambiguous, every asset accounted for. Then I did something my son would never have expected. I created a trust. A significant portion of my savings went into an education trust for my grandchildren, money that could only be used for their schooling and health care. No withdrawals, no shortcuts. Next, I transferred ownership of my house, but not to my son. I placed it under a living trust with conditions. I would live there as long as I wished. No one could sell it, mortgage it, or pressure me out. After my death, it would be sold, and the proceeds distributed according to instructions I set, some to family, some to charity. I also kept something aside. An emergency fund in my name alone. Freedom money. The confrontation. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon. My son arrived unannounced, his wife with him. They sat across from me like a panel. "We need to talk," he said. That sentence never means peace. He leaned forward. "We've been discussing your situation. You're getting older, Dad. It's time you let us take over." "Take over what?" I asked calmly. "Your finances, the house, everything." His wife added, "It's for your own good." I looked at them both and felt something strange, not anger but clarity. "I've already taken care of everything," I said. My son frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I continued, "my money, my property, my decisions, they're already arranged." He laughed nervously. "Dad, you're not making sense. We haven't signed anything." "That's correct," I said. "You haven't." His face hardened. "So who has control?" I stood up slowly and went to the cabinet. I took out a folder and placed it on the table. "Read." When control slipped from his hands, he flipped through the pages, his confidence draining with every paragraph. His wife stopped smiling. "What is this?" he asked sharply. "My will, my trust documents, my decisions." "You put the house in a trust," he said, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "So I wouldn't have to ask permission to live in my own home." Silence fell heavy. "And the accounts?" he asked. "Mine," I replied, "fully accessible, fully protected." "You didn't trust us," his wife snapped. I looked at her, then at my son. "Trust is not taken," I said softly. "It is earned." My son's voice rose. "This isn't fair, we're family." "Yes," I said. "That's why I made sure everyone is protected, including myself." He realized then that the control he thought he had was gone. That the quiet old man he underestimated had been awake all along. The aftermath. They left shortly after, no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just wounded pride. For weeks my son didn't call, then one day he did. His voice was different, quieter. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said. "I didn't know you saw me that way," I replied. There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," he said eventually. "It wasn't perfect, apologies rarely are, but it was a start." Our relationship didn't magically return to what it once was, but it became more honest, more respectful. He no longer talks about my money. He asks how I am instead. What I learned. Growing old doesn't mean growing helpless. Love doesn't cancel the need for boundaries. And silence doesn't mean weakness, it can mean preparation. I didn't act out of revenge or bitterness, I acted out of self-respect. Because a lifetime of hard work deserves dignity at the end, not control taken by those who forget what it took to build everything they now expect to inherit. Moral of the story. Independence is not lost with age, it is lost when we stop protecting it. True love respects boundaries, and wisdom prepares quietly for what emotions may fail to prevent.